Chapter 5 of Adventures of Maya the Bee. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Betsy Bush, January 2009. The Adventures of Maya the Bee by Waldemar Bonsels. Translated by Adele Zold Seltzer and Arthur Guterman. Chapter 5 The Acrobat. Oh, what a day! The dew had fallen early in the morning, and when the sun rose and cast its slanting beams across the forest of grass, there was such a sparkling and glistening and gleaming that you didn't know what to say or do for sheer ecstasy. It was so beautiful, so beautiful. The moment Maya awoke, glad sounds greeted her from all round. Some came out of the trees, from the throats of the birds, the dreaded creatures who could yet produce such exquisite song. Other happy calls came out of the air, from flying insects, or out of the grass and the bushes, from bugs and flies, big ones and little ones. Maya had made it very comfortable for herself in a hole in a tree. It was safe and dry, and stayed warm the greater part of the night, because the sun shone on the entrance all day long. Once, early in the morning, she had heard a woodpecker rat-a-tat-tatting on the bark of the trunk, and had lost no time getting away. The drumming of a woodpecker is as terrifying to a little insect in the bark of a tree as the breaking open of our shutters by a burglar would be to us. But at night she was safe in her lofty nook. At night no creatures came prying. She had sealed up part of the entrance with wax, leaving just space enough to slip in and out, and in a cranny in the back of the hole, where it was dark and cool, she had stored a little honey against rainy days. This morning she swung herself out into the sunshine with a cry of delight, all anticipation as to what the fresh, lovely day might bring. She sailed straight through the golden air, looking like a brisk dot driven by the wind. "I'm going to meet a human being today," she cried. "I feel sure I am. On days like this, human beings must certainly be out in the open air enjoying nature." Never had she met so many insects. There was a coming and going and all sorts of doings. The air was alive with a humming and a laughing and glad little cries. You had to join in. You just had to join in. After a while, Maya let herself down into a forest of grass, where all sorts of plants and flowers were growing. The highest were the white tufts of yarrow and butterfly weed, the flaming milkweed that drew you like a magnet. She took a sip of nectar from some clover, and was about to fly off again, when she saw a perfect droll of a beast perched on a blade of grass, curving above her flower. She was thoroughly scared. He was such a lean, green monster. But then her interest was tremendously aroused, and she remained sitting still, as though rooted to the spot, and stared straight at him. At first glance you'd have thought he had horns. Looking closer, you saw it was his oddly protuberant forehead that gave this impression. Two long, long feelers, fine as the finest thread, grew out of his brows, and his body was the slimmest imaginable, and green all over, even to his eyes. He had dainty forelegs and thin, inconspicuous wings that couldn't be very practical, Maya thought. Oddest of all were his great hind legs, which stuck up over his body like two jointed stilts. His sly, saucy expression was contradicted by the look of astonishment in his eyes, and you couldn't say there was any meanness in his eyes either. No, rather a lot of good humor. "Well, mademoiselle," he said to Maya, evidently annoyed by her surprised expression, "never seen a grasshopper before? Or are you laying eggs?" "The idea!" cried Maya in shocked accents. "It wouldn't occur to me. Even if I could, I wouldn't. It would be usurping the sacred duties of our queen. I wouldn't do such a foolish thing." The grasshopper ducked his head and made such a funny face that Maya had to laugh out loud in spite of her chagrin. "Mademoiselle," he began, then had to laugh himself and said, "You're a case! You're a case!" The fellow's behavior made Maya impatient. "Why do you laugh?" she asked in a not altogether friendly tone. "You can't be serious expecting me to lay eggs, especially out here on the grass." There was a snap. "Hoppity hop," said the grasshopper, and was gone. Maya was utterly nonplussed. Without the help of his wings, he had swung himself up in the air in a tremendous curve. Foolhardiness bordering on madness, she thought. But there he was again, from where she couldn't tell, but there he was beside her on a leaf of her clover. He looked her up and down, all round, before and behind. "No," he said then pertly, "you certainly can't lay eggs. You're not equipped for it. You haven't got a borer." "What? Borer?" Maya covered herself with her wings and turned so that the stranger could see nothing but her face. "Borer, that's what I said. Don't fall off your base, mademoiselle. You're a wasp, aren't you?" To be called a wasp! Nothing worse could happen to little Maya. "I never!" she cried. "Hoppity hop," answered he, and was off again. "The fellow makes me nervous," she thought, and decided to fly away. She couldn't remember ever having been so insulted in her life. What a disgrace to be mistaken for a wasp, one of those useless wasps, those tramps, those common thieves. It really was infuriating. But there he was again. "Mademoiselle!" he called, and turned round part way, so that his long hind legs looked like the hands of a clock, standing at 5 minutes before 7:30. "Mademoiselle, you must excuse me for interrupting our conversation now and then, but suddenly I'm seized. I must hop. I can't help it. I must hop, no matter where. Can't you hop too?" He smiled a smile that drew his mouth from ear to ear. Maya couldn't help keep from laughing. "Can you?" said the grasshopper, and nodded encouragingly. "Who are you?" asked Maya. "You're terribly exciting." "Why, everybody knows who I am," said the green oddity, and grinned almost beyond the limits of his jaws. Maya never could make out whether he spoke in fun or in earnest. "I'm a stranger in these parts," she replied pleasantly, "else I'm sure I'd know you. But please note that I belong to the family of bees and am positively not a wasp." "My goodness," said the grasshopper, "one and the same thing." Maya couldn't utter a sound, she was so excited. "You're uneducated," she burst out at length. "Take a good look at a wasp once." "Why should I?" answered the green one. "What good would it do if I observed differences that exist only in people's imagination? You, a bee, fly around in the air, sting everything you come across, and can't hop. Exactly the same with a wasp. So where's the difference? Hoppity hop!" And he was gone. "But now I am going to fly away," thought Maya. There he was again. "Mademoiselle," he called, "there's going to be a hopping match tomorrow. It will be held in the Reverend Sinpeck's garden. Would you care to have a complimentary ticket and watch the games? My old woman has 2 left over. She'll trade you one for a compliment. I expect to break the record." "I'm not interested in hopping acrobatics," said Maya in some disgust. "A person who flies has higher interests." The grasshopper grinned a grin you could almost hear. "Don't think too highly of yourself, my dear young lady. Most creatures in this world can fly, but only a very, very few can hop. You don't understand other people's interests. You have no vision. Even human beings would like a great, elegant hop. The other day I saw the Reverend Sinpeck hop a yard up into the air to impress a little snake that slid across his road. His contempt for anything that couldn't hop was so great that he threw away his pipe. And reverends, you know, cannot live without their pipes. I have known grasshoppers, members of my own family, who could hop to a height 300 times their length. Now you're impressed. You haven't a word to say, and you're inwardly regretting the remarks you made and the remarks you intended to make. 300 times their own length. Just imagine. Even the elephant, the largest animal in the world, can't hop as high as that. Well, you're not saying anything. Didn't I tell you you wouldn't have anything to say? But how can I say anything if you don't give me a chance? All right then, talk, said the grasshopper pleasantly. Hoppity hop. He was gone. Maya had to laugh in spite of her irritation. The fellow had certainly furnished her with a strange experience. Buffoon though he was, still she had to admire his wide information and worldly wisdom, and though she could not agree with his views of hopping, she was amazed by all the new things he had taught her in their brief conversation. If he had been more reliable, she would have been only too glad to ask him questions about a number of different things. It occurred to her that often people who are least equipped to profit by experiences are the very ones who have them. He knew the names of human beings. Did he then understand their language? If he came back, she'd ask him, and she'd also ask him what he thought of trying to go near a human being or of entering a human being's house. Mademoiselle! A blade of grass beside Maya was set swaying. Goodness gracious, where do you keep coming from? The surroundings. But do tell, do you hop out into the world just so, without knowing where you mean to land? Of course, why not? Can you read the future? No one can, only the tree-toad, but he never tells. The things you know. Wonderful, simply wonderful. Do you understand the language of human beings? That's a difficult question to answer, mademoiselle, because it hasn't been proved as yet whether human beings have a language. Sometimes they utter sounds by which they seem to reach an understanding with each other, but such awful sounds, so unmelodious, like nothing else in nature that I know of. However, there's one thing you must allow them. They do seem to try to make their voices pleasanter. Once I saw two boys take a blade of grass between their thumbs and blow on it. The result was a whistle which may be compared with the chirping of a cricket, though far inferior in quality of tone, far inferior. However, human beings make an honest effort. Is there anything else you'd like to ask? I know a thing or two. He grinned his almost audible grin. But the next time he hopped off, Maya waited for him in vain. She looked about in the grass and the flowers. He was nowhere to be seen. End of chapter 5. Chapter 6 of The Adventures of Maya the Bee. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Betsy Bush, January 2009. Adventures of Maya the Bee by Waldemar Bonsels. Translated by Adele Zold Seltzer and Arthur Guterman. Chapter 6. Puck. Maya, drowsy with the noonday heat, flew leisurely past the glare on the bushes in the garden, into the cool, broad-leaved shelter of a great chestnut tree. On the trodden sward in the shade under the tree stood chairs and tables, evidently for an outdoor meal. A short distance away gleamed the red-tiled roof of a peasant's cottage, with thin blue columns of smoke curling up from the chimneys. Now at last, thought Maya, she was bound to see a human being. Had she not reached the very heart of his realm? The tree must be his property, and the curious wooden contrivances in the shade below must belong to his hive. Something buzzed. A fly alighted on the leaf beside her. It ran up and down the green veining in little jerks. You couldn't see its legs move, and it seemed to be sliding about excitedly. Then it flew from one finger of the broad leaf to another, but so quickly and unexpectedly that you might have thought it hadn't flown but hopped. Evidently it was looking for the most comfortable place on the leaf. Every now and then, in the suddenest way, it would swing itself up in the air a short space and buzz vehemently, as though something dreadfully untoward had occurred, or as though it were animated by some tremendous purpose. Then it would drop back to the leaf as if nothing had happened, and resume its jerky racing up and down. Lastly, it would sit quite still, like a rigid image. Maya watched its antics in the sunshine, then approached it and said politely, "How do you do? Welcome to my leaf. You are a fly, are you not?" "What else do you take me for?" said the little one. "My name is Puck. I'm very busy. Do you want to drive me away?" "Why, not at all. I am glad to make your acquaintance." "I believe you," was all Puck said, and with that he tried to pull his head off. "Mercy!" cried Maya. "I must do this. You don't understand. It's something you know nothing about," Puck rejoined calmly, and slid his legs over his wings till they curved round the tip of his body. "I'm more than a fly," he added with some pride. "I'm a housefly. I flew out here for the fresh air." "How interesting!" exclaimed Maya gleefully. "Then you must know all about human beings." "As well as the pockets of my trousers," Puck threw out disdainfully. "I sit on them every day. Didn't you know that? I thought you bees were so clever. You pretend to be, at any rate." "My name is Maya," said the little bee rather shyly. Where the other insects got their self-assurance, to say nothing of their insolence, she couldn't understand. "Thanks for the information. Whatever your name, you're a simpleton." Puck sat there tilted like a cannon in position to be fired off, his head and breast thrust upward, the hind tip of his body resting on the leaf. Suddenly he ducked his head and squatted down so that he looked as if he had no legs. "You've got to watch out and be careful," he said. "That's the most important thing of all." But an angry wave of resentment was surging in little Maya. The insult Puck had offered her was too much. Without really knowing what made her do it, she pounced on him quick as lightning, caught him by the collar, and held him tight. "I will teach you to be polite to a bee," she cried. Puck set up an awful howl. "Don't sting me," he screamed. "It's the only thing you can do, but it's killing. Please remove the back of your body. That's where your sting is. And let me go. Please let me go, if you possibly can. I'll do anything you say. Can't you understand a joke? A mere joke. Everybody knows that the bees are the most respected of all insects, and the most powerful, and the most numerous. Only don't kill me. Please don't. There won't be any bringing me back to life. Good God! No one appreciates my humor." "Very well," said Maya, with a touch of contempt in her heart. "I'll let you live on condition that you tell me everything you know about human beings." "Gladly," cried Puck. "I'd have told you anyhow. But please let me go now." Maya released him. She had stopped caring. Her respect for the fly and any confidence she might have had in him were gone. Of what value could the experiences of so low, so vulgar a creature be to serious-minded people? She would have to find out about human beings for herself. The lesson, however, had not been wasted. Puck was much more endurable now. Scolding and growling, he set himself to rights. He smoothed down his feelers and wings and the minute hairs on his black body, which were fearfully rumpled, for the girl bee had laid on good and hard, and concluded the operation by running his proboscis in and out several times, something new to Maya. "Out of joint, completely out of joint," he muttered in a pained tone. "Comes of your excited way of doing things. Look, see for yourself. The sucking disc at the end of my proboscis looks like a twisted pewter plate." "Have you a sucking disc?" asked Maya. "Good gracious, of course. Now tell me, what do you want to know about human beings? Never mind about my proboscis being out of joint. It'll be all right. I think I had best tell you a few things from my own life. You see, I grew up among human beings, so you'll hear just what you want to know." "You grew up among human beings?" "Of course. It was in the corner of their room that my mother laid the egg from which I came. I made my first attempts to walk on their window shades, and I tested the strength of my wings by flying from Schuyler to Gotha." "What are Schuyler and Gotha?" "Statues," explained Puck, very superior. "Statues of two men who seem to have distinguished themselves. They stand under the mirror, one on the right hand and one on the left hand, and nobody pays any attention to them." "What's a mirror? And why do the statues stand under the mirror?" "A mirror is good for seeing your belly when you crawl on it. It's very amusing. When human beings go up to a mirror, they either put their hands up to their hair or pull at their beards. When they are alone, they smile into the mirror, but if somebody else is in the room, they look very serious. What the purpose of it is, I could never make out. Seems to be some useless game of theirs. I myself, when I was still a child, suffered a good deal from the mirror. I'd fly into it and, of course, be thrown back violently." Maya plied Puck with more questions about the mirror, which he found very difficult to answer. "Here," he said at last, "you've certainly flown over the smooth surface of water, haven't you? Well, a mirror is something like it, only hard and upright." The little fly, seeing that Maya listened most respectfully and attentively to the tale of his experiences, became a good deal pleasanter in his manners. And as for Maya's opinion of Puck, although she didn't believe everything he told her, still she was sorry she had thought so slightingly of him earlier in their meeting. "Often people are far more sensible than we take them to be at first," she told herself. Puck went on with his story. "It took a long time for me to get to understand their language. Now at last I know what they want. It isn't much, because they usually say the same thing every day." "I can scarcely believe it," said Maya. "Why, they have so many interests, and think so many things, and do so many things. Cassandra told me that they build cities so big that you can't fly round them in one day, towers as high as the nuptial flight of our queen, houses that float on the water, and houses that glide across the country on two narrow silver paths and go faster than birds." "Wait a moment," said Puck energetically. "Who is Cassandra? Who is she, if I may make so bold as to ask? Well?" "Oh, she was my teacher." "Teacher," repeated Puck contemptuously. "Probably also a bee. Who but a bee would overestimate human beings like that? Your Miss Cassandra, or whatever her name is, doesn't know her history. Those cities and towers and other human devices you speak of are none of them any good to us. Who would take such an impractical view of the world as you do? If you don't accept the premise that the earth is dominated by the flies, that the flies are the most widespread and most important race on earth, you'll scarcely get a real knowledge of the world." Puck took a few excited zigzag turns on the leaf and pulled at his head, to Maya's intense concern. However, the little bee had observed by this time that there wasn't much sense to be got out of his head anyway. "Do you know how you can tell I am right?" asked Puck, rubbing his hands together as if to tie them in a knot. "Count the number of people and the number of flies in a room. The result will surprise you." "You may be right, but that's not the point." "Do you think I was born this year?" Puck demanded all of a sudden. "I don't know." "I passed through a winter," Puck announced, all pride. "My experiences date back to the Ice Age. In a sense, they take me through the Ice Age. That's why I'm here. I'm here to recuperate." "Whatever else you may be, you certainly are spunky," remarked Maya. "I should say so," exclaimed Puck, and made an airy leap out into the sunshine. "The flies are the boldest race in creation. We never run away unless it is better to run away, and then we always come back. Have you ever sat on a human being?" "No," said Maya, looking at the fly distrustfully out of the corner of her eye. She still didn't know quite what to make of him. "No, I'm not interested in sitting on human beings." "Ah, dear child, that's because you don't know what it is. If ever you had seen the fun I have with the man at home, you'd turn green with envy, I'll tell you. In my room there lives an elderly man who cherishes the color of his nose by means of a peculiar drink, which he keeps hidden in the corner cupboard. It has a sweet, intoxicating smell. When he goes to get it, he smiles, and his eyes grow small. He takes a little glass, and he looks up to the ceiling while he drinks, to see if I am there. I nod down to him, and he passes his hand over his forehead, nose, and mouth, to show me where I am to sit later. Then he blinks, and opens his mouth as wide as he can, and pulls down the shade to keep the afternoon sun from bothering us. Finally, he lays himself down on a something called a sofa, and in a short while begins to make dull snuffling sounds. I suppose he thinks the sounds are beautiful. We'll talk about them some other time. They are man's slumber song. For me, they are the sign that I am to come down. The first thing I do is to take my portion from the glass, which he left for me. There's something tremendously stimulating about a drop like that. I understand human beings. Then I fly over and take my place on the forehead of the sleeping man. The forehead lies between the nose and the hair and serves for thinking. You can tell it does from the long furrows that go from right to left. They must move whenever a man thinks if something worthwhile is to result from his thinking. The forehead also shows if human beings are annoyed. But then the folds run up and down, and a round cavity forms over the nose. As soon as I settle on his forehead and begin to run to and fro in the furrows, the man makes a snatch at the air with his hands. He thinks I'm somewhere in the air. That's because I'm sitting on his think furrows, and he can't work out so quickly where I really am. At last he does. He mutters and jabs at me. Now then, Miss Maya, or whatever your name is. Now then, you've got to have your wits about you. I see the hand coming, and I wait until the last moment. Then I fly nimbly to one side, sit down, and watch him feel to see if I am still there. We kept the game up often for a full half-hour. You have no idea what a lot of endurance the man has. Finally he jumps up and pours out a string of words which show how ungrateful he is. Well, what of it? A noble soul seeks no reward. I'm already up on the ceiling listening to his ungrateful outburst. "I can't say I particularly like it," observed Maya. "Isn't it rather useless?" "Do you expect me to erect a honeycomb on his nose?" exclaimed Puck. "You have no sense of humor, dear girl. What do you do that's useful?" Little Maya went red all over, but quickly collected herself to hide her embarrassment from Puck. "The time is coming," she flashed, "when I shall do something big and splendid and good and useful, too. But first I want to see what is going on in the world. Deep down in my heart, I feel that the time is coming." As Maya spoke, she felt a hot tide of hope and enthusiasm flood her being. Puck seemed not to realize how serious she was and how deeply stirred. He zigzagged about in his flurried way for a while, then asked, "You don't happen to have any honey with you, do you, my dear?" "I'm so sorry," replied Maya. "I'd gladly let you have some, especially after you've entertained me so pleasantly, but I really haven't got any with me." "May I ask you one more question?" "Shoot," said Puck. "I'll answer. I'll always answer." "I'd like to know how I could get into the human being's house." "Fly in," said Puck sagaciously. "But how, without running into danger?" "Wait until a window is opened, but be sure to find the way out again. Once you're inside, if you can't find the window, the best thing to do is to fly toward the light. You'll always find plenty of windows in every house. You need only notice where the sun shines through. Are you going already?" "Yes," replied Maya, holding out her hand. "I have some things to attend to. Goodbye. I hope you quite recover from the effects of the Ice Age." And with her fine, confident buzz that yet sounded slightly anxious, little Maya raised her gleaming wings and flew out into the sunshine across the flowery meadows to cull a little nourishment. Puck looked after her and carefully meditated what might still be said. Then he observed thoughtfully, "Well now, well, why not?" End of chapter 6. Chapter 7 of The Adventures of Maya the Bee. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Betsy Bush, January 2009. Adventures of Maya the Bee by Waldemar Bonsels. Translated by Adele Zold Seltzer and Arthur Guterman. Chapter 7 In the Toils. After her meeting with Puck the Fly, Maya was not in a particularly happy frame of mind. She could not bring herself to believe that he was right in everything he had said about human beings, or right in his relations to them. She had formed an entirely different conception, a much finer, lovelier picture, and she fought against letting her mind harbor low or ridiculous ideas of mankind. Yet she was still afraid to enter a human dwelling. How was she to know whether or not the owner would like it? And she wouldn't for all the world make herself a burden to anyone. Her thoughts went back once more to the things Cassandra had told her. "They are good and wise," Cassandra had said. "They are strong and powerful, but they never abuse their power. On the contrary, wherever they go they bring order and prosperity. We bees, knowing they are friendly to us, put ourselves under their protection and share our honey with them. They leave us enough for the winter, they provide us with shelter against the cold, and guard us against the hosts of our enemies among the animals. There are few creatures in the world who have entered into such a relation of friendship and voluntary service with human beings. Among the insects you will often hear voices raised to speak evil of man. Don't listen to them. If a foolish tribe of bees ever returns to the wild and tries to do without human beings, it soon perishes. There are too many beasts that hanker for our honey, and often a whole bee city, all its buildings, all its inhabitants, has been ruthlessly destroyed, merely because a senseless animal wanted to satisfy its greed for honey." That is what Cassandra had told Maya about human beings, and until Maya had convinced herself of the contrary, she wanted to keep this belief in them. It was now afternoon. The sun was dropping behind the fruit trees in a large vegetable garden through which Maya was flying. The trees were long past flowering, but the little bee still remembered them in the shining glory of countless blossoms, whiter than light, lovely, pure, and exquisite against the blue of the heavens. The delicious perfume, the gleam and the shimmer, oh, she'd never forget the rapture of it as long as she lived. As she flew, she thought of how all that beauty would come again, and her heart expanded with delight in the glory of the great world in which she was permitted to live. At the end of the garden shone the starry tufts of the jasmine, delicate yellow faces set in a wreath of pure white. Sweet perfume wafted to Maya on the soft wings of the breeze. Weren't there still some trees in bloom? Wasn't it the season for lindens? Maya thought delightedly of the big, serious lindens, whose tops held the red glow of the setting sun to the very last. She flew in among the stems of the blackberry vines, which were putting forth green berries and yielding blossoms at the same time. As she mounted again to reach the jasmine, something strange to the touch suddenly laid itself across her forehead and shoulders, and just as quickly covered her wings. It was the queerest sensation, as if her wings were crippled, and she were suddenly restrained in her flight, and were falling, helplessly falling. A secret, wicked force seemed to be holding her feelers, her legs, her wings in invisible captivity. But she did not fall. Though she could no longer move her wings, she still hung in the air rocking, caught by a marvelously yielding softness and delicacy, raised a little, lowered a little, tossed here, tossed there, like a loose leaf in a faint breeze. Maya was troubled, but not as yet actually terrified. Why should she be? There was no pain, nor real discomfort of any sort. Simply that it was so peculiar, so very peculiar, and something bad seemed to be lurking in the background. She must get on. If she tried very hard, she could, assuredly. But now she saw a thread across her breast, an elastic, silvery thread, finer than the finest silk. She clutched at it quickly in a cold wave of terror. It clung to her hand. It wouldn't shake off. And there ran another silver thread over her shoulders. It drew itself across her wings and tied them together. Her wings were powerless. And there, everywhere in the air and above her body, those bright, glittering, gluey threads. Maya screamed with horror. Now she knew. Oh, oh, now she knew. She was in a spider's web. Her terrified shrieks rang out in the silent dome of the summer day, where the sunshine touched the green of the leaves into gold, and insects flitted to and fro, and birds swooped gaily from tree to tree. Nearby, the jasmine sent its perfume into the air, the jasmine she had wanted to reach. Now all was over. A small bluish butterfly, with brown dots gleaming like copper on its wings, came flying very close. "Oh, you poor soul!" it cried, hearing Maya's screams and seeing her desperate plight. "May your death be an easy one, lovely child. I cannot help you. Some day, perhaps this very night, I shall meet with the same fate. But meanwhile life is still lovely for me. Goodbye. Don't forget the sunshine in the deep sleep of death." And the blue butterfly rocked away, drugged by the sunshine and the flowers and its joy of living. The tears streamed from Maya's eyes. She lost her last shred of self-control. She tossed her captive body to and fro, and buzzed as loud as she could, and screamed for help, from whom she did not know. But the more she tossed, the tighter she enmeshed herself in the web. Now, in her great agony, Cassandra's warnings went through her head. "Beware of the spider and its web. If we bees fall into the spider's power, we suffer the most gruesome death. The spider is heartless and tricky, and once it has a person in its toils, it never lets go." In a great flare of mortal terror, Maya made one huge, desperate effort. Somewhere one of the long, heavier suspension threads snapped. Maya felt it break, yet at the same time she sensed the awful doom of the cobweb. This was that the more one struggled in it, the more effectively and dangerously it worked. She gave up in complete exhaustion. At that moment she saw the spider herself, very near, under a blackberry leaf. At sight of the great monster, silent and serious, crouching there as if ready to pounce, Maya's horror was indescribable. The wicked, shining eyes were fastened on the little bee in sinister, cold-blooded patience. Maya gave one loud shriek. This was the worst agony of all. Death itself could look no worse than that gray, hairy monster, with her mean fangs and the raised legs supporting her fat body like a scaffolding. She would come rushing upon her, and then all would be over. Now a dreadful fury of anger came upon Maya, such as she had never felt before. Forgetting her great agony, intent only upon one thing, selling her life as dearly as possible, she uttered her clear, alarming battle cry, which all beasts knew and dreaded. "You will pay for your cunning with death," she shouted at the spider. "Just come and try to kill me. You'll find out what a bee can do." The spider did not budge. She really was uncanny, and must have terrified bigger creatures than little Maya. Strong in her anger, Maya now made another violent, desperate effort. Snap! One of the long suspension threads above her broke. The web was probably meant for flies and gnats, not for such large insects as bees. But Maya got herself only more entangled. In one gliding motion, the spider drew quite close to Maya. She swung by her nimble legs upon a single thread, with her body hanging straight downward. "What right have you to break my net?" she rasped at Maya. "What are you doing here? Isn't the world big enough for you? Why do you disturb a peaceful recluse?" That was not what Maya had expected to hear. Most certainly not. "I didn't mean to," she cried, quivering with glad hope. Ugly as the spider was, still she did not seem to intend any harm. "I didn't see your web, and I got tangled in it. I'm so sorry. Please pardon me." The spider drew nearer. "You're a funny little body," she said, letting go of the thread first with one leg, then with the other. The delicate thread shook. How wonderful that it could support the great creature! "Oh, do help me out of this," begged Maya. "I should be so grateful." "That's what I came here for," said the spider, and smiled strangely. For all her smiling, she looked mean and deceitful. "Your tossing and tugging spoils the whole web. Keep quiet 1 second, and I will set you free." "Oh, thanks! Ever so many thanks!" cried Maya. The spider was now right beside her. She examined the web carefully to see how securely Maya was entangled. "How about your sting?" she asked. Ugh, how mean and horrid she looked! Maya fairly shivered with disgust at the thought that she was going to touch her, but replied as pleasantly as she could, "Don't trouble about my sting. I will draw it in, and nobody can hurt himself on it then." "I should hope not," said the spider. "Now then, look out. Keep quiet. Too bad for my web." Maya remained still. Suddenly she felt herself being whirled round and round on the same spot, till she got dizzy and sick and had to close her eyes. But what was that? She opened her eyes quickly. Horrors! She was completely enmeshed in a fresh, sticky thread which the spider must have had with her. "My God!" cried little Maya softly in a quivering voice. That was all she said. Now she saw how tricky the spider had been. Now she was really caught beyond release. Now there was absolutely no chance of escape. She could no longer move any part of her body. The end was near. Her fury of anger was gone. There was only a great sadness in her heart. "I didn't know there was such meanness and wickedness in the world," she thought. "The deep night of death is upon me. Good-bye, dear bright sun. Good-bye, my dear friend bees. Why did I leave you? A happy life to you. I must die." The spider sat wary a little to one side. She was still afraid of Maya's sting. "Well," she jeered, "how are you feeling, little girl?" Maya was too proud to answer the false creature. She merely said, after a while when she felt she couldn't bear any more, "Please kill me right away." "Really?" said the spider, tying a few torn threads together. "Really, do you take me to be as big a dunce as yourself? You're going to die anyhow, if you're kept hanging long enough, and that's the time for me to suck the blood out of you, when you can't sting. Too bad, though, that you can't see how dreadfully you've damaged my lovely web. Then you'd realize that you deserve to die." She dropped down to the ground, laid the end of the newly spun thread about a stone, and pulled it in tight. Then she ran up again, caught hold of the thread by which little enmeshed Maya hung, and dragged her captive along. "You're going into the shade, my dear," she said, "so that you shall not dry up out here in the sunshine. Besides, hanging here, you're like a scarecrow. You'll frighten away other nice little mortals who don't watch where they're going. And sometimes the sparrows come and rob my web. To let you know with whom you're dealing, my name is Thekla, of the family of cross spiders. You needn't tell me your name. It makes no difference. You're a fat bit, and you'll taste just as tender and juicy by any name." So little Maya hung in the shade of the blackberry vine, close to the ground, completely at the mercy of the cruel spider, who intended her to die by slow starvation. Hanging with her little head downward, a fearful position to be in, she soon felt she would not last many more minutes. She whimpered softly, and her cries for help grew feebler and feebler. Who was there to hear? Her folk at home knew nothing of this catastrophe, so they couldn't come hurrying to her rescue. Suddenly, down in the grass, she heard someone growling. "Make way! I'm coming!" Maya's agonized heart began to beat stormily. She recognized the voice of Bobby the dung beetle. "Bobby!" she called as loud as she could. "Bobby, dear Bobby!" "Make way! I'm coming!" "But I'm not in your way, Bobby!" cried Maya. "Oh dear, I'm hanging over your head. The spider has caught me." "Who are you?" asked Bobby. "So many people know me. You know they do, don't you?" "I'm a Maya, Maya the bee. Oh, please, please help me." "Maya, Maya. Ah, now I remember. You made my acquaintance several weeks ago. The deuce! You are in a bad way, if I must say so myself. You certainly do need my help. As I happen to have a few moments' time, I won't refuse." "Oh, Bobby, can you tear these threads?" "Tear those threads? Do you mean to insult me?" Bobby slapped the muscles of his arm. "Look, little girl, hard as steel. No match for that in strength. I can do more than smash a few cobwebs. You'll see something that'll make you open your eyes." Bobby crawled up on the leaf, caught hold of the thread by which Maya was hanging, clung to it, then let go of the leaf. The thread broke, and they both fell to the ground. "That's only the beginning," said Bobby. "But, Maya, you're trembling. My dear child, you poor little girl, how pale you are. Now who would be so afraid of death? You must look death calmly in the face as I do. So, I'll unwrap you now." Maya could not utter a syllable. Bright tears of joy ran down her cheeks. She was to be free again, fly again in the sunshine wherever she wished. She was to live. But then she saw the spider coming down the blackberry vine. "Bobby!" she screamed. "The spider's coming!" Bobby went on unperturbed, merely laughing to himself. He really was an extraordinarily strong insect. "She'll think twice before she comes nearer," he said. But there, the vile voice rasped above them. "Robbers! Help! I'm being robbed! You fat lump! What are you doing with my prey?" "Don't excite yourself, madam," said Bobby. "I have a right, haven't I, to talk to my friend? If you say another word to displease me, I'll tear your whole web to shreds. Well, why so silent all of a sudden?" "I am defeated," said the spider. "That has nothing to do with the case," observed Bobby. "Now you'd better be getting away from here." The spider cast a look at Bobby full of hate and venom. But glancing up at her web, she reconsidered, and turned away slowly, furious, scolding and growling under her breath. Fangs and stings were of no avail. They wouldn't even leave a mark on armor such as Bobby wore. With violent denunciations against the injustice in the world, the spider hid herself away inside a withered leaf, from which she could spy out and watch over her web. Meanwhile, Bobby finished the unwrapping of Maya. He tore the network and released her legs and wings. The rest she could do herself. She preened herself happily, but she had to go slow because she was still weak from fright. "You must forget what you have been through," said Bobby. "Then you'll stop trembling. Now, see if you can fly. Try." Maya lifted herself with a little buzz. Her wings worked splendidly, and to her intense joy she felt that no part of her body had been injured. She flew slowly up to the jasmine flowers, drank avidly of their abundant scented honey juice, and returned to Bobby, who had left the blackberry vines and was sitting in the grass. "I thank you with my whole heart and soul," said Maya, deeply moved and happy in her regained freedom. "Thanks are in place," observed Bobby, "but that's the way I always am, always doing something for other people. Now fly away. I'd advise you to lay your head on your pillow early tonight. Have you far to go?" "No," said Maya, "only a short way. I live at the edge of the beech woods. Goodbye, Bobby. I'll never forget you, never, never, as long as I live. Goodbye." End of chapter 7. Chapter 8 of the Adventures of Maya the Bee. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Betsy Bush, January 2009. Adventures of Maya the Bee by Waldemar Bonsels. Translated by Adele Zold Seltzer and Arthur Guterman. Chapter 8 The Bug and the Butterfly. Her adventure with the spider gave Maya something to think about. She made up her mind to be more cautious in the future, not to rush into things so recklessly. Cassandra's prudent warnings about the greatest dangers that threaten the bees were enough to give one pause. And there were all sorts of other possibilities, and the world was such a big place. Oh, there was a great deal to make a little bee stop and think. It was in the evening particularly, when twilight fell and the little bee was all by herself, that one consideration after another stirred her mind. But the next morning, if the sun shone, she usually forgot half the things that had bothered her the night before, and allowed her eagerness for experiences to drive her out again into the gay whirl of life. One day she met a very curious creature. It was angular and flat as a pancake, but had a rather neat design on its sheath, and whether its sheath were wings or what, she couldn't really tell. The odd little monster sat absolutely still on the shaded leaf of a raspberry bush, its eyes half closed, apparently sunk in meditation. The scent of the raspberries spread around it deliciously. Maya wanted to find out what sort of an animal it was. She flew to the next door leaf and said, "How do you do?" The stranger made no reply. "How do you do again?" And Maya gave its leaf a little tap. The flat object peeled one eye open, turned it on Maya, and said, "A bee. A world is full of bees," and closed its eye again. "Unique," thought Maya, and determined to get at the stranger's secret. For now it excited her curiosity more than ever, as people often do who pay no attention to us. She tried honey. "I have plenty of honey," she said. "May I offer you some?" The stranger opened its one eye and regarded Maya contemplatively a moment or two. What is it going to say this time? Maya wondered. This time there was no answer at all. The one eye merely closed again, and the stranger sat quite still, tight on the leaf, so that you couldn't see its legs, and you'd have thought it had been pressed down flat with a thumb. Maya realized, of course, that the stranger wanted to ignore her, but you know how it is. You don't like being snubbed, especially if you haven't found out what you wanted to find out. It makes you feel so cheap. "Whoever you are," cried Maya, "permit me to inform you that insects are in the habit of greeting each other, especially when one of them happens to be a bee." The bug sat on without budging. It did not so much as open its one eye again. "It's ill," thought Maya. "How horrid to be ill on a lovely day like this. That's why it's staying in the shade, too." She flew over to the bug's leaf and sat down beside it. "Aren't you feeling well?" she asked, so very friendly. At this, the funny creature began to move away. Move is the only word to use, because it didn't walk or run or fly or hop. It went as if moved by an invisible hand. "It hasn't any legs. That's why it's so cross," thought Maya. When it reached the stem of the leaf, it stopped a second, moved on again, and to her astonishment, Maya saw that it had left behind a little brown drop. "How very singular," she thought, and clapped her hand to her nose and held it tight shut. The veriest stench came from the little brown drop. Maya almost fainted. She flew away as fast as she could and seated herself on a raspberry, where she held on to her nose and shivered with disgust and excitement. "Serves you right," someone above her called, and laughed. "Why take up with a stink bug?" "Don't laugh," cried Maya. She looked up. A white butterfly had alighted overhead on the slender, swaying branch of the raspberry bush, and was slowly opening and closing its broad wings, slowly, softly, silently, happy in the sunshine. Black corners to its wings, round black marks in the center of each wing, 4 round black marks in all. Ah, how beautiful, how beautiful! Maya forgot her vexation, and she was glad, too, to talk to the butterfly. She had never made the acquaintance of one before, even though she had met a great many. "Oh," she said, "you probably are right to laugh. Was that a stink bug?" "It was," he replied, still smiling. "The sort of person to keep away from. You're probably very young still." "Well," observed Maya, "I shouldn't say I was, exactly. I've been through a great deal. But that was the first specimen of the kind I had ever come across. Can you imagine doing such a thing?" The butterfly had to laugh. "You see," he explained, "stink bugs like to keep to themselves. They are not very popular, so they use the odoriferous drop to make people take notice of them. We'd probably soon forget the fact of their existence if it were not for the drop. It serves as a reminder, and they want to be remembered, no matter how." "How lovely, how exquisitely lovely your wings are," said Maya. "So delicate and white. May I introduce myself? Maya, of the nation of bees." The butterfly laid his wings together to look like only one wing, standing straight up in the air. He gave a slight bow. "Fred," he said laconically. Maya couldn't gaze her fill. "Fly a little?" she asked. "Shall I fly away?" "Oh, no, I just want to see your great white wings move in the blue air. But never mind, I can wait till later. Where do you live?" "Nowhere specially. A settled home is too much of a nuisance. Life didn't get to be really delightful until I turned into a butterfly. Before that, while I was still a caterpillar, I couldn't leave the cabbage the livelong day, and all one did was eat and squabble." "Just what do you mean?" asked Maya, mystified. "I used to be a caterpillar," explained Fred. "Never!" cried Maya. "Now," said Fred. pointing both feelers straight at Maya. "Everyone knows a butterfly is first a caterpillar. Even human beings know it." Maya was utterly perplexed. Could such a thing be? "You must really explain more clearly," she said. "I couldn't accept what you say just so, could I? You wouldn't expect me to." The butterfly perched beside the little bee on the slender swaying branch of the raspberry bush, and they rocked together in the morning wind. He told her how he had begun life as a caterpillar, and then, one day, when he had shed his last caterpillar skin, he came out a pupa or chrysalis. "At the end of a few weeks," he continued, "I woke up out of my dark sleep and broke through the wrappings or pupa case. I can't tell you, Maya, what a feeling comes over you when, after a time like that, you suddenly see the sun again. I felt as though I were melting in a warm golden ocean, and I loved my life so that my heart began to pound." "I understand," said Maya. "I understand. I felt the same way the first time I left our humdrum city and flew out into the bright scented world of blossoms." The little bee was silent a while, thinking of her first flight. But then she wanted to know how the butterfly's large wings could grow in the small space of the pupa case. Fred explained. "The wings are delicately folded together like the petals of a flower in the bud. When the weather is bright and warm, the flower must open. It cannot help itself, and its petals unfold. So with my wings, they were folded up, then unfolded. No one can resist the sun when it shines." "No, no, one cannot. One cannot resist the sunshine," Maya mused, watching the butterfly as he perched in the golden light of the morning, pure white against the blue sky. "People often charge us with being frivolous," said Fred. "We're really happy, just that, just happy. You wouldn't believe how seriously I sometimes think about life." "Tell me what all you think." "Oh," said Fred, "I think about the future. It's very interesting to think about the future. But I should like to fly now. The meadows on the hillside are full of yarrow and Canterbury bells. Everything's in bloom. I'd like to be there, you know." This Maya understood. She understood it well, and they said good-bye and flew away in different directions, the white butterfly rocking silently as if wafted by the gentle wind, little Maya with that uneasy zoom-zoom of the bees which we hear upon the flowers on fair days and which we always recall when we think of the summer. End of chapter 8.